Well, we might get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this second part of our Australian Circular Economy Hub Circular Council webinar series. This time we're featuring Lake Macquarie City Council from New South Wales. So for those of you who joined us for part one last week, thank you for joining us again. And we certainly hope that you'll be able to join us for our other monthly webinar series as time progresses on a range of topics. So firstly, today, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are all calling in from and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining today from the land of the Yugambeh language people, and I welcome you to share your location where you are in the chat. My name is Dr. Nicole Garofano, and I'm the Head of Circular Economy Development at Planet Ark at the ACE Hub, the Australian Circular Economy Hub, or the ACE Hub. The ACE Hub is funded by the Australian Government and our sponsors Bingo Industries, Keep Cup and Planet Ark Power. And our mission is really to facilitate the transition to a circular economy in Australia by providing a platform for knowledge sharing and for collaboration. And today's event is just another of the excellent examples that we're able to offer in terms of this knowledge sharing. A quick bit of housekeeping. So the event today you would have seen is being recorded and will be available to watch and share from our website by the end of next week. If we can ask you to use gallery view for today and ensure that you can see the presentations properly by finding view options at the top of the screen and then selecting fit to window. Apparently there's been some updates to Zoom, so this is why we're just reiterating those comments. The final 25 minutes today are actually reserved for questions. So we've got a great opportunity to ask Debbie lots of questions, to ask our guest lots of questions. So please, for that, use the Q&A box rather than the chat box. And we'll also be using the voting function in the Q&A box. So if you can click on the little hands up for the questions that you would like to see answered, and we'll try and get to as many as we can. No doubt we've got some good time, so hopefully we'll get through quite a few. I also just wanted to mention again that we'll be sending a follow-up email next week, combining all the resources and links that are mentioned in last week's conversation, along with everything that we'll hear today. So if you're really keen to watch something over the weekend, you can watch last week's recording. It is ready to view on our website now, and you'll see a message from Lucy in the chat, from Lucy from our team in the chat with that link. So last week we heard from Tim Askew of the achievements of the collective of councils that make up the Hunter Joint Organisation. And we also heard from Jonathan Wood from Sustainability Advantage and Jenny Philippe from Edge Environment. And both of these individuals and organisations have been important supportive stakeholders in the Hunter JO circular economy journey to this point. We learned from the group that transition takes time, but finding your champions and your partners is key to the knowledge sharing process. Tim, Jonathan and Jenny all emphasised that the need to find a compromise is really core when you're trying to build relationships. Jonathan said it was important to check your ego at the door when developing a new way of being when it comes to circular economy. And when building the Hunter JO roadmap, networks and consultants like Edge Environment are also very helpful. And of course, leveraging all the funds that you're able to access can also be critical. So before we get into this week's content, last week we asked those in the audience if you were working on a circular economy project with or within council, and 60% said they did. They were actually working on a circular economy project. So this week we wanted to ask a follow-up poll question. And if you weren't here last week, that's perfectly fine. We'd still love to hear from you. But the question is going to be on the screen now. And so the question is really to ask you, for those of you who've already started the steps to implement a CE project, tell us what projects from this list that we've compiled that your project might be focused on. So it'll be interesting to see where people are investing their energies and their time. We'll just give a couple of minutes to attract those numbers. We've got a few people looking at strategy development, which is great. That's certainly where we can really see the collaboration efforts come to fruition. And the internal conversations are also really important as well. This is great. So we've got some really good activities. Education is another one that's really important. So the overarching really is around strategy development and those internal conversations. And we'll hear from Debbie about how important those two elements are today. So thank you for participating in that. Okay, so to get some context, the Hunter is the largest regional, let's close my box off here. So today we're taking a deeper dive into one of the Hunter JO councils, Lake Macquarie City Council. So to get some context, the Hunter is the largest economy in regional New South Wales, accounting for 28% of the gross regional product in the state. Lake Macquarie's economy is estimated to contribute 19% of the Hunter region's economy, worth an estimated almost $20 billion. And it's enabled by more than 13,000 active businesses, which is really exciting. The potential impact of applying circular economy principles to the area can really be quite considerable. And a really pivotal factor to the design and implementation of the CE framework for the Lake Macquarie City Council is our guest today, Circular Economy Lead, Debbie O'Byrne. Debbie realised the opportunities that existed in the circular economy through her groundbreaking MBA research in New Zealand. Debbie has since worked with a range of government organisations, research institutes, and large corporates to integrate circular economy principles into the design or redesign of their business strategy. Debbie also partnered with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to host the first international Pacific Circular Economy Summit in New Zealand. Fantastic achievement. And at the beginning of 2020, Debbie became Australia's first circular economy lead in local government by joining with Lake Macquarie City Council. What's even more revolutionary is Debbie has her own budget, so that's really exciting, and has been able to use an all-of-council approach to implement the circular economy framework. Most recently, Debbie's actually been appointed to both the Hunter Joint Organisation and the ACE Hub Circular Procurement Working Groups. So we're really excited to see how Debbie's experience can contribute to the development of those opportunities. So with that introduction, I welcome Debbie and thank you for making time for us today, knowing how in demand you are, rock star of circular economy in local council. We're very excited to hear what you're working on and to share your learnings, and also to support the many other councils who we know are joining us today, who are trying to build their business case with their internal teams about circular economy. Perhaps in the future, they might be able to hire someone in a role such as yours. So with that, over to you, Debbie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to ACE Hub for inviting me along today to, talk about the journey from Lake Mac's perspective and hopefully to share some of our learnings. I would just like to say that I am on Awabakal land and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So let's hoping the tech works. We've had a couple of glitches this morning. So here we go again. Let's see. No, we're struggling to move the slides. Just bear with me a second. We fixed this earlier. No, we're stuck. Okay, Nicole, I'm going to stop sharing and try it again because that worked last time. So
yeah,
sorry,
sure,
everybody.
No Let's see.
The wonderful world of technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was so proud of myself the other day when I participated in my first virtual platform. Is that up now? Can you see that?
Can see that, and it's
moving.
Yay,
yes.
Excellent.
I don't know why it does that. Maybe it's that update, Nicole. I'm running with that one. I'm running with that excuse.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and talk today. It's been quite an exciting journey for me at Lake Mac. And just to give you a little bit of the context, somebody asked me the other day, what was the big driver for Lake Mac establishing the circular economy lead role? And I chatted to, I wasn't there, so I know some of the background, but not all of it. And it was really two key things. Partly it was the China sword and this real challenge that we were facing around waste. What are we going to do with these waste streams that, we have well-defined routes to tackle them and deal with them and process them? And then the other piece was, this region as Nicole outlined, is a very successful region and has flourished for decades off the back of coal. So it is at the pointy end of a transition. We know that coal is a sunset industry. We know that change is coming. How do we prepare our community and our economy to still be flourishing and to leverage the assets and the skills that already exist in this region so that we can continue to be a successful region, even despite the changes that are coming, particularly in that low carbon economy space. So there's three key main elements to my role. And as you can imagine, this is system change, system work. So a lot of these overlap, whether projects or departments or working within external stakeholders. So the policy and framework piece was important because that enables Lake Mac to embed it beyond just one individual. And my experience in the past has been passionate individuals can achieve a certain amount, but if you don't bed it into the way the organization works, you know, they move on or they leave and then the work leaves with them. So we didn't want to do that. We also have a strong focus on being a smart city, so aligning those two. And what we're seeing internationally is that smart city umbrellas are starting to not be submerged, but aligned more closely with circular cities. You can have a very smart city that's not very sustainable. So you're starting to see circular economy come in over the top of some of those strategies. And then we also want to build capability across all the organization, getting people to make decisions in a different way and consider different, you know, ask different questions, if you will. And so therefore getting that into strategic and operational plans. And then we have the materials piece. How are we going to decarbonize our material choices? How are we going to reframe waste as a resource? And it's not as simple as, you know, getting a document, and I've seen this, getting a document and going select all and finding the word waste and go, oh, let's type in resource or resource recovery in there and we've done a good job. Because it's also about changing mindsets. Historically, councils, waste has been a cost center for councils. It's just something they have to do. What's it, roads, rates, and rubbish? I heard that phrase recently. So it's how do we take some opportunities that actual reframing could present? So we have regularly entrepreneurs banging on the door looking for waste, whether it's biochar, food, poultry feed, you know, green hydrogen, all kinds of stuff. And we've never considered, oh, is there an interest in this as a resource? So we actually have to meaningfully engage with that conversation. And then clearly we want to reduce and reuse. So it's not just about replacing one material in a road or, you know, the fabric of a building with a non-virgin material or secondary material. It's actually, do we actually need to build another thing? Can we sweat idle assets? Can we actually repurpose buildings, move them to different places, or does it always have to be a new thing? So those conversations we've started to have. And then there's the innovation piece. So how can we frame Hunter, New South Wales, and Australia as engines of circular activity? How do we provide that enabling ecosystem for startups, but also to transition the incumbents? We've got some significant energy infrastructure in our region, in our LGA, you know, billions of dollars of investment over many years in transmission lines. How do we keep that as an active, valuable asset? I know there's lots of talk of, you know, solar farms and, you know, transmission lines from the desert. And I just wonder if we put a carbon profile over that thing versus the other thing, would that actually stack up? That's a lot of investment when we're already sitting on a significant asset that we could transition. And then there's a really exciting, interesting, topical conversation happening around precincts. If you look at the New South Wales waste and material strategy, it's precincts. So that's really good because circular opportunities lend themselves very well to a precinct approach. And then circular tourism. We've had this huge disruption from COVID. I think tourism is going to look very different in the future. I think people will travel maybe less, but they'll stay for longer. What do those experiences need to look like? So we're literally looking at all parts of the system that Lake Mac Council might have an interest in. And now my slide is stuck again. Baga. I don't want to have to stop sharing. Probably that's a message to me, Debbie, you're talking too long on your slides and you need to go faster.
No, okay, not at all. There we go.
There we go. So what's our approach? So we have an approach that's around, you know, doing things. So the policy and the framework, as many of you on the call will know, takes time, and it's some of the processes are very rigid and defined, and there's a series of hoops you have to go through in committee meetings and all kinds of stuff. So we recognize that that's just the lived reality of working in council, and we started that process, but we also got on and did some projects, and that's around not only the value of the work itself that creates, getting good outcomes, socializing the principles, but by the time that the framework and policy land, you've already got some momentum behind the work that you've got underway, which kind of smooths the path a little bit, if you like. So one of the things that is an area of interest to me is this whole idea of horizon scanning. And I was just talking to Nicole earlier. When I wrote my thesis, 2014, one of the things I think we should watch what's happening internationally in the waste space. China has adopted the law for the promotion of the circular economy in 2009. Some of these waste streams don't really fit really well with the circular economy. The EU is pushing for stronger attention to waste. So what does that actually mean? And one of the recommendations I proposed was watch what happens in China. Some of this waste streams won't fit inside. So how do we get that sense of what's happening internationally and make that for the organizations with which we work? And so I think there's an opportunity for governments and councils not to be market takers. And if we take a more holistic view and look what's on the horizon, we can help to shape those markets. I'm reading a book at the moment by a lady called Mariana Mazzucato. She was listed as one of the top 5 most influential economists, and she wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial State, challenging that notion that private industry has all the innovative ideas, and actually that's not true. Most of the funding for Google's algorithm came from state funding. So how do we lean into some of those and actually be market shapers? So those are the areas that I think we need to be a bit more mindful of. And here's a couple of things that are barreling down. We know there's huge pressure on construction and carbon intensive industries to shift. That pressure is coming from the EU and other places. We know that we're seeing this shift in, divesting from fossil fuels. I find this headline really interesting because Norway made a lot of its money in its pension funds off the back of oil. But yeah, I think that's a good example of horizon scanning. Okay, this is not what's going to look like in the future. But I also think it gives there's great opportunities in there. I did a presentation to the Dante board the other day, and I said that BlackRock was like, $1 trillion in assets. And one of the board members came back and said, actually, Debbie, I've just Googled, it's $6 trillion, and they're the leading. So when you see big market players like this shift, then that's a clear indication. That's a market signal. And if you try and filter out the noise and go for the signal, this is something we really need to be mindful of, and how are we going to move this forward. So I just wanted to give a very brief overview of the process we took with our policy. I did lots of consultation before we did the policy. We had to kind of cobble together something. A lot of the frameworks out there are fit for business purposes, profit-driven models. So we kind of had to cobble together pieces from one thing, pieces from another thing to kind of find something that fit. So we actually based the center of our model from Peterborough in the UK. They won an award for their framework. I'm a big believer in don't reinvent the wheel. If somebody's done a good job, reach out, ask them, are they happy for you to use their materials? We did tweak it slightly to meld people and culture into one wedge so that we could create one for an Indigenous perspective, which I think is really important in Australia, that we don't miss that piece. And then this is the plan on a page. This is just a trigger. So once we got the policy through, the numerous hoops and things that, policies have to go through, I'm in the middle of about 30 workshops with staff, and that's co-designing the action plans. I don't want them to see this as, Debbie O'Byrne's, plan or project. This is their projects that I support, not my project. And to me, the co-design is an important element of that. I've had feedback in other organizations I work for that, the sustainability teams are hugely passionate, gung-ho about the work they want to do, and they don't necessarily take the time to understand where the people on the other end of that conversation are at. So we're co-designing. And that allows us to go really ambitious with the teams who are ready for that, and kind of nurture the ones who are, oh my God, what is this thing? So it gives us a little bit of that. And these are just some of the questions that we're using. So these eight numbered boxes are the gray ring in the middle of our framework. And then I've just stuck it on a page. And then we give this to the team after the session and go, here's some questions. You don't need to decide on a project now. Take some time. I usually show them some case studies of what their peers are doing in that space internationally to give them some examples. Often it's easier to critique something or for it to trigger an idea than it is to start from scratch. And then this piece on the city scan. So this is a piece of work that we've been doing for quite a few months. The circular economy in the Netherlands have done about 60 of these, around the world. And they have what's called a concierge pathway. We couldn't afford the budget for them to do it on our behalf, which is, I think they're about 170 to 250K. And that's my whole budget. So I didn't quite have the appetite for that. I wanted to do some other things. But they have a concierge pathway where they make the platform available and then you do the work yourself. So we pulled together a coalition of the willing, City of Newcastle, Hunter JO. We've got a whole series of players to pitch in some funding to get this piece underway. And so we've learned a lot along that journey. One of the key things, it was amazing working with the team. They're just in a whole different space than us, which was really exciting. The downside is a lot of the assumptions embedded in the data sets are European centric. So the categories. So there's a whole naming convention around categories. So you can, extrapolate carbon emissions and apply them to sectors and all kinds of interesting things. So to me, while it was very, very valuable, I'm not sure it's the perfect fit going forward in Australia, because we actually need to be developing these tools and building this ourselves. We had to do a lot of manual manipulation of the tool and the assumptions in the tool to get where we needed to get to. But still we learned a huge amount from working with the team. So we're just reviewing the document. We will publish it hopefully in the next month. It's 80 pages long, which, to geeky, nerdy people like me is hugely exciting weekend reading, but the average person's not going to read that. So we're pulling together a slightly more succinct, shorter version that's more palatable to, to some of our exec teams, and just breaking down the key messages and the key learnings into that document. So that's coming. And I almost didn't put this slide on because I've shown it a few times. This is one of the projects we're involved in. Planet Price, and I found this through my contacts in Everledger. Leanne Kemp is the chief entrepreneur. Well, she used to be the chief entrepreneur for Queensland, and I've been looking for this tool for ages that would help me understand carbon, and how do I figure out, how do I know where the carbon is, how do I decide on a procurement decision if I can't see it? And so I was looking for a tool. I only actually considered throwing some money at developing one, and then I was introduced to Andy Hill from Planet Price. So what Andy's done is he sold his company to IBM a few years ago, and he went and did the Cambridge Sustainability Leadership Masterclass, or I can't exactly remember what that's called. And so this was his project, and it was about how do we take something that right now, a lot of the reason we're in this mess is we're not pricing for externalities. How do we start grappling with taking that information and costing it and including it in our procurement decisions? So we've been working on this project with Andy for quite some time. And a good example is $1,000 worth of paper. There's actually a $470 premium on top of that you don't pay, but the planet pays. And that's in land use conversion, water, greenhouse gases, and emissions. So he's taken it far beyond what I originally was looking at in carbon and applied a whole different set of categories to it. And the reason I included it in the slides today is I've been, talking about Andy's project for a while. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've had 4 people reach out to me wanting to find out, what are you guys doing? It's not us. We're just playing in the sandbox. It's not our tool. And they're all from markets. They're all external. They're not councils, although we're beta testing with councils. They're investment and finance advisors or asset owners who go, how are we going to do this thing? How are we going to report and support good decisions and advise our clients around good decisions when we don't have the right tools? So I thought it was worth, throwing it in there, because who knows who's on the webinar today, and that might still be another, stakeholder who might find it of interest to them. So this is Lake Mac's report. So basically we gave them an extract from our procurement system, and then he does what he does in his cool algorithm, and then he comes back and this gives us a picture as to where the impacts our procurement decisions are having on the planet. So the bigger the circle, you know, the bigger the impact, and the darker the red, the higher the planet price. So there's lots of ways to chunk the information. This is an alternate version of the same information. So when I go to talk to teams where this is relevant, I can show them, listen, this is where we're having the worst impact. When we're choosing what projects to do for our circular economy action plans, we should be using this information to target where we can have the most benefit. So now we're beta testing that with 3 or 4 other councils, just so that we can sense check, you know, the data, and, you know, are we doing the right things? And, you know, I'm always believing the broader the brains trust, the better. And partly that's also de-risking it for Lake Mac, in that we don't want to get too far ahead of our peers. We actually need a cohort to come on this journey, because, you know, if you're to think blue sky, you know, in a couple of years, wouldn't it be great if we could say to some of our suppliers, please put your product through the Planet Price portal and include that in your tender document, so we have some visibility. Not only does that help with our decisions, it also helps, you know, drive change in the supply chain. So if you want to get better outcomes, you've got to talk to your suppliers and go, what can we do different? So this is very, you know, blue sky thinking at the moment. Be a huge amount of work and engagement around this, but, you know, I think we need to shoot for the stars, and hopefully we'll hit the moon. And I just want to show you a quick, this is what it looks like now, the dashboard, and you can see he's broadened the criteria. You know, he's looking at modern slavery, corruption, eutrophication, things that weren't in the original. So this is very much a work in progress, but it's a project that we're really excited to be part of. And, you know, it's leaning into those spaces where, how do we support the entrepreneurs who are doing cool stuff? And so one of the comments I just wanted to make, somebody asked, well, what are the challenges? How do you overcome resistance? And one of the ways that I've done that is, you know, it can be it's very easy to get mired in the minutiae of the job that you do, and get trapped in the institutional logic of the environment and the organization you're part of. And one of the ways I think that's helpful to kind of break through that is to zoom out. And lately what I've been doing is talking about Earth Overshoot Day. And that's, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Earth Overshoot Day, but it marks the date when we're actually using the resources of the rest of the year, the rest of next year, and the rest of the future generation. So we're using their resources to live the lifestyle that we have now. And so when you look at Earth Overshoot Day and how it's tracked over time, in the 70s, you know, we were doing pretty good. You know, it was, you know, it wasn't ideal, but, you know, we were using a little bit, and now look where we're at. This year, 2021, it's July 31st. So that's how, and look how fast it is. I'm reading a book by a great Australian author. I can't remember, Rebecca, I think her name is, How to Talk About Climate Change So People Will Listen. I think it's that one. And it's most of the emissions that we have now have been emitted since the first episode of Seinfeld aired in the 80s. You know, when I read that, I was like, oh dear God, you know, we got to go faster. We got to be more ambitious. We got to do more. And I just wanted to point out that that's the average. So that's globally. And then this is the Earth Overshoot Day by country. And this is where we are. So the average country will take till July to reach Earth Overshoot Day and start consuming future resources. We are leading the pack here in a very bad way. So Australia we are not in a place where we want to be. So we need to go harder and do more. So this is just, you know, an example of how do you get people up out of the weeds and get them to think about the broader picture. And then one of the challenges we also have is that it can be very confusing, particularly for businesses, but also organizations. Well, how are we going to do this thing? I've got to do the SDG thing. I've got to do the net zero thing. How are we going to plan for just transition? Oh, we've got this new sovereign manufacturing conversation. What does that mean? And we need to, you know, diversify our economy. So I think the circular economy narrative can help tame some of that complexity. If you do the circular economy and you do it well, you can map a way to reach all of those other things. So I'm not saying the circular economy piece is perfect. You know, there's still some things that need, you know, we also need to be challenging this whole notion of consumption, that actually we need to just consume less and not just find cool ways to make new things out of old stuff. We actually probably need to reduce our footprint more broadly. But I think the circular economy piece can help tame some of that fear and that complexity, and find a pathway to get something coherent. And then you can, I hate that phrase, tick all the other boxes, because, you know, it just bugs me, but it can help to achieve some of those other goals. And so that's probably it from me. So we leave some time for questioning. So hopefully that was useful and there wasn't too much duplication for those of you who have seen me present before. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of your questions.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was awesome. I've made a couple of small pages of notes here just from those comments, and I've certainly heard you speak before, and we have our website on. We have our case study, your case study, on our website, which Lucy and our team has put together. So, but still, every time, and I think this is the beauty of opportunities like this, is that every time you hear things differently.
Yeah,
you know,
agreed.
so and so I think that's where the value in our questions from those in the audience will be able to bring out some other points that we might not have thought of previously. Okay, so with that, I'll open it up to the questions. Now, if you've got questions, please use the Q&A. We've got a couple in here. Let me see. Okay, Steve says that I think that's what he means. He's involved in Lake Macquarie plastic-free cafes. How do we get around COVID hesitancy with reuse coffee cups?
That is a challenge, and it's something that, you know, does worry me that we might slip backwards, where we start to become so worried about, you know, COVID contamination that we'll go back to you know, single-use cups and single-use stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It just amazes me the great ideas that come from the community, and we're really keen to support the community and enable them to do the things that, you know, their ideas. I did a presentation which Stuart might have been at, where we talked about what can we do, what are the other ways we could tackle a problem like that. And one of the ideas which I actually wasn't aware of, even though I used to own a cafe, I should have thought of that, was cafes have what they're called knockout boxes, where, you know, when they've made your coffee, they knock the coffee into this big long tube, and in that tube is a black bag. And because it's in a black bag, this organic material ends up in landfill because it can't go into the composting piece.
Yes. Yeah.
And so one of the things that the community said, can we do something different? So we bought a pile of, you can get green composting knockout bog liners. So we bought a bunch of those, and we're waiting to do a trial as soon as COVID opens. So I think it is a challenge, and I think we need to also have conversations around the trade-offs. You know, and now that we're moving into a time where more and more people are vaccinated, and we are going to get back out there, we need to hold the ground we've achieved and not slip backwards. And I think that's a collaboration with the community, because it is a community. It's the community out there at the coffee shops. So, and some of them, we've certainly seen a change where at the beginning we had lots of coffee shops wouldn't take, you weren't allowed to bring your reuse cup. Sorry, we're not allowed to do that. And now I've seen that change, that where, you know, people are getting a bit more, this is the new normal. We still care about these issues, and we need to hold the line.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, community often we think that community doesn't have a voice and can't create change, but there are really some great examples of where that change can exist from collectively pushing together. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So the next question is from Matthew Kolesnik. Sorry if I've pronounced your surname there incorrectly, Matthew, but when you've presented the Planet Price results to others in the council, what's been their response?
We haven't presented it to exec yet, so you've got a sneak preview there.
Ooh, okay. Hot off the press.
Hot off the press. So partly it's around, for certain teams, it's not quite as relevant. And, you know, I have to pick my battles. So where would it make sense to take this piece and apply it? And the area where we've seen it would have the most impact is clearly in that material space, the road space. So one of the other projects that we did, which I've presented on before, is the roading tool that comparing toners, tires, plastics. What are the impacts? So we're trying to find a way if we can take that tool and integrate it with the Planet Price piece, so we can not do two separate things and do one thing. So to answer the question, the teams that we have socialized it with and we have talked about it with, it's usually a spectrum, but often it's, God, this is really helpful, because we don't, we're just used to, filling out the materials, the bill of materials or whatever we need, and we don't necessarily have visibility or know what the impacts of that are. But the solving that problem more holistically requires collaboration across the supply chain, across a system, because it's not just about the material, it's about making sure the engineers, designers are comfortable with the functional requirements of the material. So if it's not fit for purpose, it doesn't matter how green it is or how, we just can't use it. We can't build a road that's going to sink in 5 years. So they have different needs. But generally, the feedback has been really, really positive, and they find it a very helpful window into something that they didn't have a window into before.
Yeah, great. And I think it really also adds to that story element. If you're looking for good news stories out of council, and you can make some decisions that are informed by that sort of evidence, it's a valuable tool in lots of ways. Debbie, I wanted to ask, you mentioned the Rhodes Project there. This isn't a question on the list, but you mentioned the Rhodes Project. I wondered if you could share a little bit about the importance of who do you invite to help you with these kinds of projects? Obviously, this is something that council is driving, but how do we engage with other stakeholders in the region to sort of create the activities?
So that project was facilitated through the Sustainability Advantage. I mean, I had this idea, I knew what I wanted, kind of. I didn't know I would get quite so good, so I was quite happy with that. But we have, through our Sustainability Advantage membership, we get 30 hours of consulting work that we can use to do whatever we want to do with it. And Sustainability Advantage have a panel, but that's not a barrier, because if there's no one on the panel who quite does this thing, they're open to other options. So and the advantage to working with Jonathan, who was on the webinar last week, is Jonathan has a window into stakeholders I don't have a window into, particularly as I'm new to Australia. I've only moved here like a year and a half ago. So he knows what's going on in his space. And so when I told him that we were looking at ecotoxicity, water intensity, and carbon in those 6 materials with those 3 criteria, he knew that Hunter Water would be interested in that, because water is really, really important in Australia, and it surprises me that it's not considered in more holistically in how decisions are made. So I thought, well, you have got to have water in there. So they contributed some of their hours, and we contributed some of our hours, and then we got it to a certain point, and then I realized, actually, no, we need to do the carbon abatement. We wanted to get pricing for carbon in there, which it wasn't in the original version. So we just reach out and we find out who the experts are, who's really good in this space. So obviously we got Edge Environment did that LCA piece and helped us to pull it together. And it's been great working with the guys, but if you saw the tool, you'd know it was built by an engineer and an LCA specialist. And I want it to look like it was built by Planet Price, where for a non-expert who doesn't quite that interface. So that's what I'm trying to do now, is find somebody to make it prettier. That's not to say we're going to get it out there as soon as we can, and any council who wants to use the tool can. We just found a glitch in one of the cells last week in the carbon abatement piece, and that's why it's been delayed. As soon as that's fixed, we should be good to go. And it won't be perfect. And I think that's one of the things I tell people. We've got to stop making perfection the enemy of good enough to give it a go. We need to just get it out there. And you might do really cool things with that tool that we never thought of. If you do, please share it. But we don't want people to go, oh, it's not right, and come back to me with big loads of problems. That's not what this is about. It's about, we think it's fit for purpose. It will change and grow over time. So it's about finding the people who are a bit more, a little bit comfortable with trying things a little bit outside the box. But the more stakeholders and partners you can bring in, the more expertise and the knowledge trust and the brains trust you get. So we're big on collaboration in the Hunter.
Great, that's excellent. And so that then builds onto Sally's question, which I think you might have already alluded to there, which is, would you recommend that other councils across Australia band together like the Hunter ones have? And what do you see as the main benefits of that collective councils coming together?
I think there's huge benefit in that. And I did a presentation for Local Government Victoria a month or so ago, which was really, really useful. And I think there's about 60 or 70 councils dialed into that session. And because the challenges in local government are a little bit different. And I usually am not a fan of people saying, oh, we're different, the rules don't, the rules, we have to stick to the rules. I think, we need to challenge the rules. And I think, one of the things that we need to do more collectively is this piece of legislation or this thing, which was designed then in a linear environment, built with, the linear was just the background noise. Circular is becoming, I think of it in, it's like the coding. The coding for the economy used to be linear, literally the language, the rule, everything about it. Now we're shifting to circular. Those pieces of legislation, including the Local Government Act, may have been fit for purpose then, and they may not be fit for purpose now. And that it needs a collective conversation across all councils. What is it we were trying to achieve with that? In that environment, in that world, now our world is different. What do we need to? So I think there's huge value in that. And I think, the ASOP can play a role in, convening groups like that. I mean, I think it would be great to get a local government, New South Wales group together. And then we connect it in a node. What was it? One of your team said to me, it's like islands in the lagoon. We connect to all the other islands in the lagoon, because we have common challenges in councils, but then we also have policy differences at a state level. So the rules that are the funding mechanisms that one state can leverage, we can't, because the rules are slightly different. You guys had a webinar on regenerative finance a few weeks ago, and I had a chat with Darren afterwards, and there was all these cool stuff he was doing, but when we actually looked under the hood, oh, there's no mechanism for that in New South Wales. We'd have to, in the Local Government Act here is a bit, and I thought all the local government acts were the same, but they're not, which I learned. So that kind of thing. So unpacking that, I think as a collective is far more powerful. And you share the workload, you share the learnings. And one of the things we've just done is convened a Circular Economy Tech Advisory Group. And that's really for councils. It's about, because we get bombarded with questions, people want to do really cool things. We need to have a collective answer, because we're not leveraging the learning of another council who's had a conversation around that. So we need to be sharing that information more holistically.
Great.
So short answer is yes.
Great. I just wanted to add to those in the audience, just if you can use the little thumb up tool on some of these great questions that are coming through, if you've got some priorities. This one here from Anonymous is, hi Debbie, great initiative. Is there any initiative from local councils that you're aware of for circular procurement? Would be great to see reuse, repurpose stories coming out of local government.
Yes. So I'm involved, you mentioned on the Hunter JO Circular Procurement Group. So we have a piece of work actively underway, and that's at a Hunter JO level where the paperwork's gone out. We've gone out for to gather the information, and it's around what are we going to do around circular procurement. And I think one of the challenges is circular procurement is not the same as sustainable procurement. They're similar but different. And I think what we're trying to get a sense of where we're at, but we're also looking at spend categories. So, very much the similar information we extracted for the planet price piece. In extraction, we look at, okay, what are you spending? What volumes, what materials, what are you spending your money on? So that across the Hunter JO, we can go, okay, where does it make sense to intervene? You don't want to spend a huge amount of time and effort intervening on something that actually isn't a lot of money and it isn't a lot of volume. So it might be, it might I care about and are passionate about, but we have to go for the big wins initially. That's not to say we won't get to them. So that's an active project underway. And I see a note pop up. I must reach out to Scott there if they've got a policy, because
they have. I should add
because
that.
That's what we're trying to get to, to have something that would not just inform the policy but inform projects. So what would a tender look like? Where and it's an interesting one, because if you consider something like, I had a conversation with staff around air conditioning as a service, which you see in Singapore and other countries in Asia. And you look at all the assets, the air conditioning assets that Lake Mac would own, and they're due for a maintenance upgrade and a review and an audit. Okay, which one needs to be replaced when? When you go out now in a linear approach, what you'll get is lots of new stuff, because that's what you've tendered. So if you go out and say, we want air conditioning as a service for the next 20 years, We are happy for you to audit our existing assets and keep some of them in play, repair, maintain for as long as possible. And we don't really want, we don't really want to manage these. And this was just an off the cuff conversation I had. So now you're getting something that you wouldn't have got if you tended that way. Because what the incentive is, oh, I've got to sell Lake Mac a bunch of cool new stuff because that's really good for my business. But if it's, we just want the service. And if you can keep these materials and this equipment in play much longer, extend its life, generally that's probably not an outcome we get if we don't consider something as a service. So that's where sustainable procurement might look like, make sure the materials are good and you use the right trays and the right wood and the right, whatever it is you're tendering, and it doesn't get you the circular reuse, procurement avoidance outcome that you might want.
And I think that's a really important point as well, because if we're talking about delivering air conditioning in that example as a service, then it really ramps up the onus on the designers of those products and the manufacturers to now develop a quality product that can be repaired and maintained. And that's where the money then, so it shifts from that initial sales item through to a much more longer term relationship with your client, because you're developing a product that's actually far better made, because it will sustain over time and be able to be repaired and maintained. So it's a really important point.
Exactly like Philips have done with the lighting as a service.
Exactly.
So that's the outcomes we want: high end, modular, minimum maintenance, safety and design, good materials.
Yeah. Thank you. So Emma's asked, what are the types of things that have come out of the staff workshops you mentioned that you've been running? Is it a focus on procurement, or, what sort of, any gems coming out of that?
There's actually definitely some gems and some things I hadn't even thought of. And I started out originally thinking I was going to do 16 or 17 workshops, and it blew it to 30 because, what do I know? I don't know what some of these teams do. I get this, org chart, and then I find out there's lots of other things under there. So it totally runs the, the spectrum from, can we look at, certainly the roading project will inform some teams' work. And one of the things I've encouraged is, not every team needs to have a project, but every team needs to be involved in a project. So if you can get 3 teams to go, okay, so we need you to be involved and you to be involved, the designer, the procurement team, whatever it might be, because that's what we want to do. We want to break down the silos and get past, I call it budget tribalism, where everyone's holding on to their budgets. Oh, that's not my budget. I'm not doing that. Whereas if we can find what's the best outcome for the system of Lake Mac. So trying to get that collaboration piece going. But one of the ones I love was, we have a crew called a team that work with the community, the land care. So we've got one of the, a huge amount of examples of a huge volunteer network who look after, public spaces, the bush, all areas like that. And so I went and did a presentation to their team, and they're developing, doing an upgrade of their building, and they could have considered something in that, but it's not really what they do. That's really the designers of the building. So what, I said to them, talked a bit about what they did. And so they want to regenerate the, natural environment, which to me is really important. I'm getting lots of projects in the designing out waste, circulating materials, but regenerating natural systems doesn't fit as easily in some of those pieces. So we had a conversation, and they've landed on a project where they're going to take a seed and they're going to follow the life of that seed through the nursery, through, I'm going to video it, through the nursery, through where it's planted, and track it over time. Great. So that's their idea and that's their project. And I'm absolutely delighted with that. I mean, because there's narratives and storytelling is really important in that shift. So, and it's up to them. I would rather have them take ownership of that project than me impose a project on them that go, oh God, this is another thing to do. And that's the other thing we've been really deliberate about. I've said to teams, try and pick a project that's in your operational plan. You're going to do it anyway. And then we just try and put a circular lens across those projects.
Yeah, and that's a great idea.
Because I don't want to add more work to people, but they're busy doing work. So let's pick something that you're doing anyway and try and find a way to make it, to get a circular lens across the top of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? That people think, oh, circular economy, it's another thing we've got to layer on top, but actually it's integrated in what you're actually doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's just a new way, a new model, a new language, a new system.
Yeah. Great. So Callan has asked, have you seen the need or value in framing the CE conversation without a focus on materials and environmental aspects? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I mean, one of the reasons why I did, people ask me why I didn't do an environmental science degree. I've always been passionate about the environment, because this is not an environmental science problem. It is a business and human behavior problem that just happens to have environmental outcomes, poor environmental outcomes. So I often don't lead with the environmental conversation. And so I depending on the audience, I tailor the discussion and the narrative and the case studies and examples to the audience. And a huge part of the audience are interested in economic development. And often circular economy, can end up sitting in the waste team or the sustainability team. And there's areas where that makes sense. But actually in other teams, it sits in economic development. So there is a way to say, and partly that's around getting engagement in, not focusing so tightly on fear mongering and, fear, this is terrible things being done to us. It's like, this is a shift, it's happening. The move is underway. Where are the opportunities in that? So I think one of the strengths and probably a little bit of its weakness is the leading the economy piece. It engages a suite of stakeholders that just switch off when they see that you're going to come and talk about the environment. They don't see it as part of their job, or they don't see where it has, relevance to them, or particularly, outside of council, where it's about jobs, and more jobs and growth and the economy and diversity, all of that. So yes, there is an advantage to tailoring the message to the audience. But fundamentally, this is an economic paradigm shift that captures something that we missed in the first one, which is you cannot have infinite growth inside an enclosed system. That's just, we have to break the laws of physics, or we have to re-engineer the economy. So that's probably not going to happen with the physics thing. So we probably need to go the other way. So we have to lean into that economic conversation for sure.
Yeah, so valuable. And so this might be our last question. Maybe we might get an extra couple of ones in. But Steve O'Keefe wants to know, how's council getting engagement from residents in the community to support circular economy? Is that an area that you're focusing on?
So that's something, I mean, I've done numerous presentations to the community, and, the community are really, really engaged in this. Often they know more about circular economy than staff in council does, which is really great. And so, yes, we do work with the community. So I'm working with the sustainability engagement team. I'm a team of one. So there's limits to what I can achieve on my own. So I partner with other members of, of other teams. So we've got a sustainability engagement team, and then we've got a Sustainable Neighbourhoods Alliance, which a staff member liaises. So I do a lot with those teams. And one example was, I mentioned the Beehive project that has been underway in Bendigo, and they're looking for other councils to potentially trial that platform. So when I presented on that, members of the community reached out and said, oh, we're really interested in that platform. So then I took that to the engagement teams. And so what we did was we put a survey out there, because one of the things I'm mindful of is that you can be, when you're in an area like I'm in, you can be in a little bit of a bubble where you attract people who think like you. Yes. And people who, oh my God, and you think it's all great, momentum behind it, but actually it's like 60 people, which, that's still not bad. So we did a survey, and I understand, I haven't seen the results yet. I don't think it's fully closed. Would you be interested in a platform like this? Would you pay $5 a month, which I think is what the fee is? And what was interesting to me about that piece was, yes, people are doing this anyway. They're doing it on Facebook. What's the Gumtree? They're doing some of this anyway. The advantage to the Beehive piece is it's more deliberate around creating community resilience, connections, connecting people to their neighbors, and you can choose the size of your neighborhood. But the other piece, which was interesting, was it doesn't sell your data. So you can, which is a lot of what people have concerns around the Facebook elements, is that actually I'm engaging in this, and then suddenly I've got all these pop-ups about trying to sell me something that I was actually trying to gift for free to my neighbors. So that $5 a month ensures that you're in a platform that doesn't happen. But the other thing is the platform ultimately is owned by the community. So if they figure out ways to use it in an entrepreneurial way, that sticks local. That value goes to the owners of the platform. And one of the exciting things I liked about that one was you can plug other things into it. So a localized, I can't remember the name, but it's a localized version of Uber, where it's actually local people who work in it and own it, properly paid, not zero contract hours. That can be plugged into the platform if you're part of it. So if you're looking for a Uber, actually you get the local version of that.
Yeah,
so it's
nice.
building that community wealth building. So community wealth building is something very well developed in the EU, particularly in England and Scotland, where there's a deliberate strategy to enable communities to have an opportunity to own assets or be involved in asset building, particularly as jobs become more, iffy into the future, robots, AI, all that stuff. So yes, we absolutely do engage, but probably we'll do more of that as the capability of CE is built across the organization, and other staff can take a lead and do more of that, separate to my ability to engage.
Great. Excellent response. We're at 12:57, and I know that there are some other questions that we didn't get to, and I know that Steve Morris, your question here has got four votes. I'm not sure if you can do a quick minute response to this one. It's a big question. But what are your thoughts about council activities becoming regenerative over time?
Absolutely. That's absolutely where we need to get to. And that's a little bit what I mentioned earlier is zooming out. One of the things that we're working with, and it's, it baby steps, is what are the system level measures we are going to use to decide if our projects are working. We can do lots of really cool stuff in council and KPIs that we're very familiar with, but where is it actually connected to a system level measure? Where is it actually bending the curve on emissions? Where is it actually regenerating natural systems? So absolutely, because, people have heard me say, sustainability is only useful if you're happy with the status quo and you want to sustain it. We are long past the point where that is actually reasonable. We have got to repair some of the damage that we've done. And I think what we learned from COVID is those green spaces, our natural environment, and the bushfires, all of the loss of biodiversity, people feel that deeply. And how do we ensure that the rebuilding of our economy and building back better addresses those issues? I mean, I would hate us to be the generation that sees polar bears disappear and butterflies. So yes, we absolutely have a role to play in that space.
Great. Debbie, thank you so much. You were awesome in answering all those questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them today. But I just wanted to thank you so much for your time, Debbie. It's always such a pleasure to hear your stories and to hear your, for you to share your learnings. We can just learn so much from your journey, and those of, in your team and that are supporting you. To those of you, so thank you again, Debbie.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. So to those of you in the audience, we hope the last 2 weeks have actually given you some really great insight into how collaboration is at its best, and most importantly, how councils can start their journey on circular economy. It's really important to have this knowledge to start the next stage of your journey. As I mentioned, today's recording will be available next week, packaged up with the part 1 of this version. Just as a reminder, you can watch last week's episode over our long weekend, for those of us who are having long weekend, if you feel that you want to do that. To find out about our upcoming events, for the latest news, you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website, acehub.org.au. Our next event's actually going to be preparing us for COP26, which will be important. So we hope that you can join us for that. And at the very end of this, if you can just stay online for a couple of extra minutes, you'll see some questions appear when we end the webinar, and that's just helping us as a little survey to identify what sorts of topics you're interested in for our future action and events. So thanks again to the ACE Hub team. I want to say thank you to Maddie and thank you to Lucy and the rest of the team for coordinating this series. Everyone does a fantastic job pulling it all together. And to everyone who joined us today, all the best as you continue on your journey to the circular economy wherever you are. Thank you so much for your time, and take good care, everyone. Thanks, Debbie.